All right, let's go to the United Kingdom. It was every bit as Churchillian as it's been described. Boris Johnson walking through the streets of Kyiv, side by side with the valiant Ukrainian President Zelensky, where the President of the United States could only manage a gaffe-laden press conference from the Polish borders. The Prime Minister travelled to the heart of Ukraine's war-torn capital, bringing with him a pledge for more lethal aid, including armoured vehicles and anti-ship missiles.
And I think that the Ukrainians have shown the courage of a lion, but you, Volodymyr, have given the roar of that lion.
And as important as our federal election is, we cannot lose sight of what's happening in Ukraine. For his reaction, I want to bring in former Australian Foreign Minister Alexander Downer, joining me now from London. Alexander, really appreciate your time. I thought these pictures over the weekend out of Kyiv were extraordinary. How has Boris Johnson's visit been received in Britain?
Well, it's been received very well. There's no doubt about that. It was a courageous thing to do, to go to Kyiv. I was very interested to try to work out how he got there, since that was being pretty much kept a secret, as you could understand. But he went there from Poland by train and back the same way, so he didn't actually fly into Kyiv. But Boris has been a huge supporter of President Zelensky and of the Ukrainians. The British government has provided more weapons to the Ukrainians than any other government other than the Americans. And as you mentioned in your introduction on this visit, he announced not only more anti-tank missiles, but they were going to provide anti-ship missiles, which will be important for the defense of a city like Odessa. So making a huge effort to help the Ukrainians, and I think that's very popular in the UK.
I think it's actually helped Britain shape its character, its personality post-Brexit, post-EU. We now see the Britain of old. Talk to me, if you can, Alexander, NATO's support for Ukraine. Is it as steadfast as it was a few weeks ago? And give us your sense on these war crimes. I'm not going to call them allegations. They are war crimes that we're seeing perpetrated in Ukraine. Can we get any early movement on that? Are there things we can do to prevent more loss of civilian lives?
Well, first of all, the best way to help the Ukrainians is to provide weapons to them so they can fight off the Russians. And that has been quite successful so far, and the UK has been at the forefront of providing those weapons. Has the rest of NATO been helpful? Yes, I mean, they have been helpful, but they have been showing, other than the Americans and by the way, the Canadians as well, the other NATO countries have been showing less robust support, but they are giving support. As for the war crimes, look, one of the issues is going to be that people like President Putin and those around him and his generals will be tried as war criminals in time. And they may think that they're safe now, but if their regime collapses, they'll be a lot less safe. So there isn't a statute of limitations for war crimes, so they will have to be very careful. But I think the world will be after them over the war crimes, the killings of these people.
We know that the so-called butcher of Syria will now be the new general in charge of the Russian onslaught. How concerning is that?
Yeah, it is concerning. And what, the point that's concerning is the tactics that the Russians use. They use Second World War tactics, the tactics they used against the Germans in the Second World War, and they used against Aleppo in Syria, and they used in Chechnya, and that is mass artillery barrages into towns and cities. And, there's every sign that they are using that same kind of tactic in not just Kyiv, where they have done a lot of damage, but in Ukraine more generally, in Mariupol in particular. So what they've come up against, though, is a much better trained and cunning Ukrainian army than they'd ever anticipated. And the Ukrainians have been substantially trained over the last few years by the Americans and the British since the Russian invasion of Crimea. So they are proving to be much better at defensive tactics than the Russians would have ever imagined. So let's hope that this tactic of artillery barrages isn't a tactic that is deployed too much more by the Russians, but it's hard to stop.
All right, let's go to the French presidential election. First round concluded over the weekend. Macron, 27.6% of the vote. The right-wing candidate Marine Le Pen, 23.4%. Mélenchon at 22%, which means it will be a Macron-Le Pen runoff into the second round. What happens next? Is the president in trouble, Alexander?
It'll be tough for him. The second round will be on Sunday week. And so just between, as you say, Le Pen and Macron, I think the polls at the moment show Macron a smidge ahead, like 51-49. One was very nearly 50. One poll was very nearly 50-50. You would expect Macron to win, but there is quite a reaction in France to a range of different things, in particular the rise in the cost of living, which of course you find everywhere in the world. And Le Pen, instead of presenting herself to what the middle class French would see as kind of immigration racist, she's presenting herself as a populist who will solve the rising cost of living issue with some absolutely extraordinary and uncosted policies, like abolishing all income tax for people under 30, which I've never seen that one before, and then massive cuts to the cost of fuel. So that's obviously catching on with some people.
Let's hope it doesn't catch on over here in Australia in our campaign. Alexander Downer, thank you for your time.